Hello everyone, we are back with the Fujifilm X series Old is Gold. However, this is not an X series camera, this is an S series. This is the Fujifilm S5 Pro. This camera laid the groundwork for the later upcoming X series cameras that we all love. Let's talk a little bit about this camera. It was released back in 2006. And it has a 12 megapixel Super CCD sensor, and that's the thing that we're going to talk about a little bit more, the Super CCD sensor. You know, back in the days it was pretty common for cameras to have CCD sensors, but CCD sensors kind of lacked dynamic range, but they were very rich in the colors. So Fujifilm decided to do things their own way, almost like they did with the XH2 sensor. They created a Super CCD sensor, and what they did to create that was basically that they put 2 pixels on top of each other. This is very easily explained. One of those megapixels were taking the normal range of colors, and the other one was focusing on the highlight. And then the processor took that information and created an image that had a really good dynamic range, at least back in 2006. If you shoot with this camera, at least in JPEG, you get 12 megapixels files, but in RAW, you only get 6 megapixels files because these pixels are stacked on top of each other, so the 12 megapixel can only cover an area equal to 6 megapixel. This was a niche camera even back in the day. It was very much liked by portrait photographers and a lot of people because it had amazing colors and a really good dynamic range. Fun fact about this camera is that it's basically a Nikon D200. It's a Nikon body that Fujifilm took, and they put their own sensor in it, they put their own label, and they put their own menu system. Besides that, it's a Nikon all out. It even takes Nikon lenses on it. The build of the camera house is really solid. You could probably take a shower with this camera and it will still work, because it had all the environmental seals, as they said themselves. Another fun thing is that it basically have a dial for every single setting, and if it doesn't have a dial, it has a button. On the top we see a dial where you could change from single shooting to burst mode in a lower speed, burst mode in a higher speed, flip it to another one and you get the timer, and another one, and you have the mirror fold up. It folds up the mirror, and then next time you push the shutter, it takes the picture. That is a function used to reduce vibration caused by the mirror when it folds up, because this is a DSLR, it has a mirror. On the back you find a switch for metering mode, another switch for which focus point it should use, and a switch to open the memory card slot, and there's a spring on it, so it's really satisfying when you're opening that slot. So basically this is a camera that has everything that you could wish for. If you bought the Nikon body, the D200, it would be classified as a semi-professional camera. However, this Fuji body is more a professional level camera. Using this camera is a pretty slow experience, at least when it comes to looking at the pictures and navigating the menus and stuff like that. Using it, however, at least when it comes to autofocus performance and stuff like that, it's pretty fast, because DSLRs was initially faster than the mirrorless cameras, at least in the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons with this camera. First pro is that it's very cheap and that it's well built. And a con is perhaps, depending on how you see it, is that you only get 6 megapixels files, and that is in one way more than enough, but in another way I wish it was just a little bit higher. 12 megapixel of this camera would be perfect. However, it's not a deal breaker. This camera provides a unique experience, and that's why you probably want to pick up this camera. This is not a beginner camera, even if it would be pretty good for a beginner, but I would more recommend this camera for the experienced photographer that want a unique experience. And another pro is that it's pretty cheap. This one costed me about $100. excluding the lens. But I seen cheaper, but that's basically where the rubber and stuff like that falls up. And I saw some more expensive ones on eBay shipped in mint condition from Japan. Let's talk about the image quality. When I first got this camera, I hyped it up a lot, so I was actually a little bit disappointed. I just got my hands on a Nikon D200 and experienced all the nice things that the CCD sensor in the Nikon body provides, and I was expecting this to be super, basically. I was expecting this files and everything from this camera to be in a completely different league, but it wasn't really. But over time, when I used it a little bit, I kind of resetted my mindset, and I realized that the image quality that you get out of this camera is really, really nice. It's a good file to use it. It's a unique file, and it has that richness that the CCD sensor has, but it also has the dynamic range. That being said, the window where you could operate is pretty small. It's I would say don't blow out the highlights, because even if they are more recoverable than it is in a regular CCD sensor, it's still pretty narrow for what you can do, especially if you compare to modern cameras that has a huge dynamic range. It was fun to share this camera with you, and I could definitely recommend you to pick it up if you want a unique experience with the camera, and if you want to slow things down a little bit when working with a camera. It's a solid build, it's a nice camera, definitely worth picking up, trying it. You could probably buy it and sell it off and get your money back if you want to do that. Otherwise, it's a fun camera to keep, because it's one of those unique cameras that you don't really see nowadays. Well, Fuji still do the X-trans sensor, but besides that, most cameras are more or less the same. Back in the days, there were more experimental techniques going on, and it's fun to pick those up. If you want to see more content in this Fujifilm X series, click here to see the playlist and click here to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I see you later.